Hi everyone, I'm Gina and I'm a licensed therapist who got fed up with therapy. This is a one-woman show about my journey of finding the spaces between non-traditional approaches of healing. What I learned is that there's no one right way to heal, and you truly are your best resource. Therapists and healers are meant to support you on your path, but they don't have all of the answers. You do. This show is about the spaces between laughter, tears, thoughts, ego, soul, messy growth, and moments of joy. It's about personal liberation, inner knowing, and the tools that get you there. I will cover topics that make many of us uncomfortable and interviewing people who are willing to go there. I've spent thousands of hours listening to human beings navigate their life story, from rehabs in Malibu to homeless shelters in East LA, and now my private practice. It has been some of the most profound, painful, and beautiful moments in my life. Thank you so much for joining me. Hello, friends, and welcome back to Spaces Between. It is Gina here, and it took me a long time to decide if I wanted to write this episode, which is sort of ironic because the topic is about making a decision. But this episode feels extremely vulnerable, and most of my episodes do, but there is always this fine line in life, the question of oversharing, or what is sacred just for yourself and no one else. I'm always doing a dance with this. We live in a digital age and social media saturated culture where it feels like gold medals are given for unfiltered vulnerability. Oftentimes, it can feel like a bad car crash when we witness other humans spilling all of their guts and most intimate parts for validation, likes, or recognition. None of us likes to be judged, and this topic feels fragile for me. But at the end of the day, we can't really give a shit about what people think about us because it's about the sharing of our humanity that matters. And my intention with this podcast is that we continue to open up as humans truthfully and authentically, that life is never linear, perfect, and we are all just figuring it out on a day-to-day basis. Which leads me to the topic of today, or what has weighed on me for the last 10 years, which is deciding to become a mother. First, I will start with a little story. I'll never forget when I was in my late 20s and I was sitting in a Planned Parenthood when I didn't have good health insurance and was getting my annual pap smear. A much older gentleman, presumably somebody's grandfather who was coming with them to their appointment, sat across from me. As this happens to me frequently, he just started talking to me about his life, which is honestly why I think I became a therapist, because I don't really enjoy small talk. But anyways, he started telling me about his work, his marriages, divorces, and all of his kids and grandkids. Then he asked me if I had any kids of my own or if I wanted kids. When I replied that I didn't and didn't know if I wanted them, he paused for a long time. He then said to me, "Well, sweetie, you would be doing yourself a disservice. You wouldn't experience all of what it means to be a woman and robbing yourself of one of God's greatest gifts, being a mother." At this point in my life, I was not very confrontational. Or let me reframe that. I didn't know or have the skill set of how to self-regulate or take a deep breath when someone hurt my feelings or crossed my boundaries. So oftentimes I would either freak out and lose my shit, or I would stuff every painful word or energy cross deep within me and people please. I chose the latter. I gave him a polite smile, as women have been so hardwired to do, and said, "Well, I have time to figure it out," gifting him a deep breath of relief that I would not be perceived by him as a woman squandering my experience on earth. Thank you, Mr. Man with a penis who has never been pregnant or birthed a child, for your insightful information on what it means to be a fully expressed and fulfilled woman. You can tell I have some energy behind that. Well, I'm 40 now, and I'm still indecisive. But before I go into my indecisiveness, I want to read you something from a book called Motherhood by Shayla Hetty. She says, I realize the thing I always do. I try to imagine different futures for myself, what I would like things to occur. I don't know why I do this. When any of the things I've hoped for, whenever I have actually gotten them, are nothing like what I imagined they'd be. Then why don't I spend time acclimating myself to what actually occurred? Why not make peace with the way things are, given what I know about life from actually living? Instead, I spin fantasies when the only happiness I have ever known has occurred without my design. Your idea about what your life is about or should be like occurs before your life has had a chance to unfold. So much time that hasn't had the opportunity to present itself, you spend in efforts trying to make the space ahead fill in exactly the way you hope it might. So what is the point in having that time or being in it at all? When we have things figured out what we want in our lives or the way that they are to look, but actually it's what we want to experience. But what happens when things we thought we wanted to experience don't occur, or when something we didn't think we wanted to experience does? What's the point in living all of the other stuff, the stuff we never wanted, the stuff we didn't choose? Since life rarely accords to our expectations, why bother expecting it at all? Wouldn't it be better to not plan ahead? But that seems crazy too, because planning and desiring sometimes work. Even if it doesn't work, it still gets us somewhere, or at least seems if we didn't desire and plan, we'd be stuck in one place. It is often said that whether or not to have children is the biggest decision a person can make. That may be true, but that also doesn't mean anything. A decision happens in the private mind of one. It is not an action. For things to happen in life, other people must participate. You have to will it. Many things have to collaborate. Life itself has to will it. A decision in the mind is pretty small. It doesn't make babies. If a decision in the mind doesn't make babies, why do I spend so much time thinking about it? We are judged by what happens to us as though our deciding made it happen. A lot of time is wasted in thinking about whether to have a child when the thinking is such a small part of it, when there is little enough time to think about things that actually bring meaning, which are what? Nobody completely expected it to go the way it went. Their life. Nobody is completely happy with the way things turned out with them, but most people find pleasure and joy in it anyways. So now I'll go back to my personal journey with indecisiveness. I recently found these notes on my phone from working with an intuitive, Angelica, who had a profound effect on me and my life. She told me that my indecisiveness was sort of crazy making as she experienced it energetically in the room. That it was all this back and forth and in and out, which was related to my experience in the womb of my mother when she was indecisive about staying in the marriage with my father or divorcing. That the imprint in me was so strong and that I can only really feel connected to myself in intense situations in life, which is why I seek them out. I had gone to Angelica in my early 30s with the same question about becoming a mother, and she said, "You know, Gina, your desire to become a mother is actually about creating deeper intimacy and connection with yourself. Since you are in this juicy space of beginning to create this connection, why don't you establish more neutrality around becoming a mother and take this time to dive into yourself? Be open, Gina, to the level of intimacy life is going to offer you, particularly because you are on this path of expanded consciousness and awareness. There are multiple destinies that are available to us at any given time. There can be choices that we make as humans that limit or press our consciousness, and we will have to deal with that. There is accountability with those choices. There is a mystery to things, but there are also those things that are fated in our life. With children, for you, Gina, it's also a fear of loss of control. So that's why I keep sending you to create more space of openness and neutrality. And when you make the decision from that space, you won't end up resenting the child, which you are fearful of the sacrifices and the wild ride of the unknown of motherhood. You have a history of women carrying men in your family, which is why there is also a fear of becoming a mother. You have women who had husbands who acted like little boys, and that's actually not that uncommon. Also, your mother wasn't fully attuning to you in the womb. You had to overcompensate to feel for yourself. You don't need to leave yourself in order to be in relationship with yourself. You give too much of yourself, Gina, to others. Well, I moved to Ojai about a year ago out of Los Angeles, and I have felt like I've created this time of openness and more neutrality and a lot of stillness and slowing down and meditation. But as I'm writing this out and reading it to you, it is striking that old chord of fear of losing myself, overly caretaking other people, fear of the unknown, and sacrificing, and still needing to find more neutrality and openness around making the decision to become a mom versus being so black and white. But how do we do this with the biggest decisions of our life? Well, now I throw them to the universe or God, same thing really. And I'm not being flippant when I say this, nor would I have thought that I ever would have said this about handing things over to God. My partner and I have kind of always avoided my ovulation like the plague for the entirety of most of our relationship. And I'd say within the last year or so have whimsically tried, and I hope not to offend anybody, as I know how intensely people commit to fertility and trying to make a human. But when speaking of us personally, it spoke to both our ambivalence and indecision. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. We couldn't quite make the decision for ourselves. And then it happened. It started with very faint lines. So faint, I threw them in the garbage because I thought, no way. You would need a magnifying glass to see these. No way. But then I talked to one of my girlfriends who is recently pregnant, and she said, "What, Gina? Any faint line is positive. You are pregnant." And I'm so excited that we're pregnant together. I, on the other hand, could barely breathe. So the crazy making and the back and forth just started to rocket ship about the future of my life as a mother. Oh my God, what if this is really real? Holy shit. Say goodbye to surfing, freedom, traveling, fun, silence, meditation, doing what I want to do in my life. Say hello to financial stress, sleep deprivation, and all of my creative energy for work projects. Poof, it's going to be gone. And also, holy shit, say hello to a little human, a soul with some life lessons to learn. They chose me. We are going to be teachers to each other. As Jonas had once texted me, it will be hard, Gina, if we become parents, but it will be amazing. So I took a really deep breath and I called Jonas. His very rational and knows dramatic Gina very well said, "Well, G, you've thought your PMS and big boobs were a symptom of pregnancy before, and that line is super faint. Let's just wait and see." I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept vacillating between this is awesome and this is going to be a nightmare. Jonas left for work the next day to LA, and then I went surfing and then spent the big bucks at CVS on a digital test that said loud and clear in cap locks, like it was screaming at me, pregnant. The walls in my bathroom caved in. I burst into tears. Out of nowhere, grief of the death of my mother came upwelling, like grief sometimes does. I couldn't call her. She wasn't anywhere near me physically. So I just sobbed and I sobbed some more. And then I texted Jonas and some of my favorite lady friends, pretty much saying over and over again, "Holy shit," again with a mix of terror and excitement. I then left for a friend's birthday weekend in Palm Springs, hesitant that I hadn't processed this fully with Jonas in person, and also that I couldn't have a glass of wine to maybe take some of the nerves off, or oddly, salami, because a friend had just told me about the dangers of lunch meat in the early stages of pregnancy. Really? Well, shit, good thing I'm not in love with charcuterie plates. So that weekend we played pickleball, and I had these moments of almost wanting to sit out because I was so dizzy and hormonally off. They drank beer, laughed, and ate mushrooms, and I watched with this sense of grief of old Gina dying inside of me. The fun, the wild, the friend who will go on your surf trip last minute woman who will dance with you to Beyonce into the wee hours of the night, howling to the moon. Sounds dramatic, yes, but I was flush with hormones and my life was about to radically change. We got into the car and someone lovingly said to me, "Mama G, can you put on the radio?" And as we got in, I burst into tears. I did not feel ready to become a mom. And the universe presented me just that. I woke up the next morning with sharp pains in my lower abdomen. I laid in bed and again thought to myself, "Holy shit." I texted friends who reminded me that cramping and spotting is normal in the beginning stages of pregnancy, but intuitively I knew it wasn't. Again, I burst into tears and walked into the hallway to run into my friend Allison. I felt guilty that I was needing to take my car to leave and go home, but I had to take care of myself. She said to me, without skipping a beat, "What are you feeling right now?" I said, "Well, in one drop of blood and some cramping, I see and feel sadness, grief, deep relief, surfing, and a little bit of red wine again." I went home to a very sad Jonas, and I was feeling both sadness and relief, which was really hard for him to process. So the next day, we took our confused emotions to our favorite place in the world, the beach, watching the ocean, taking long breaths, holding hands, and he would squeeze mine when I cried in confusion. I had to spend the next week texting back friends who I had prematurely told, and I don't regret it. I told my friends that I wouldn't live in shame if I had a miscarriage or chemical pregnancy, and I don't. I think actually it's bullshit that so many women feel like we have to hide this when this is really such a common thing. But something I did realize that was major, and I'd love to share with all of you since I'm sharing everything, is that when we go through really difficult and trying times in our life, one of the greatest gifts we can give to people is to just listen, to offer space, to not give advice or project our experiences or feelings onto another's. And I know it was all from the heart and well-intentioned for me, but there was also a lesson in it. I realized how much I have probably done this same thing when trying to help another or quote unquote take their pain away, instead of just letting them have their pain to hold, to feel, and to release. I know it's the most well-intentioned with myself or others, but this was such a gift to realize often in life, we don't need to say that much except, "I love you, I'm here for you, and if you need my support, again, I'm here." So back to the title of this episode, Making Big Life Decisions. How do we make them? What have I learned from this experience is that we can make choices and decisions in our life and take action with free will, but most of it is out of our hands. And this is where I believe in the power of surrender, and the power of giving something over to the divine. My therapist said to me the other week, just visualize, Gina, giving your indecision to the divine. So I imagined my hands giving over this sparkly gold dust that was wild and all over the place. And I prayed, please show me if I'm supposed to be a mother in this life incarnation as Gina Minardi, if it is for the highest evolution of my soul. If it is not, so it is. I'm writing this episode for anyone who has been on the fence of becoming a parent or is making a life decision that will radically change the trajectory of your experience of who you are. But isn't life about transitions, growths, deaths, and rebirths? Discovering parts of ourselves unknown, embracing, surrendering, experiencing the magic and mystery of it all, because so much of it is one big question mark. I would say that I've been on a deep, deep path of opening myself up to life, finding the neutrality and the openness and stillness around it, and surrendering to the path of having the deepest love affair with myself, most importantly, with or without a child. And I will end and wrap this all up with something written by my beautiful and wise friend, Laura Rubin, for anyone who cannot have children or has made the decision not to. It's titled, The Big Letting Go. The past 2 years have been a process of stripping things away, of letting go. I said goodbye to the reality of having children of my own. After extensive explorations, a decision was made. I won't manipulate my hormones in order to bring a babe of my own into this world because no doctor could or would conclusively say to me that as a breast cancer survivor, it was safe for me to do so. So I'd have a baby, but potentially have to fight for my life again. My body has been through too much already, and it didn't seem like much of a start in this world for a kiddo either. This was not a Faustian bargain I could stomach, so I walked away from the tests and treatments and decided to just live my life. Do I ever get sad about it? Yes. Sometimes my arms feel empty. I physically ache to hold the kids I thought I would raise. And frankly, I am so over myself at this point. I felt ready for this life to be about something other than me, ready to be a supporting role instead of the lead character. But not everyone in this lifetime is meant to procreate. I have so much maternal love to give, and that's a beautiful thing. It is an unusual opportunity to find productive ways to channel that creativity and intent. Maybe that's the bigger adventure. Last summer, I started communing with a radically incredible group of women once a month. We are all child-free, by choice, by accident, by happenstance, and in full stride. None of us are young anymore, but we aren't old either. Our lives are full of meaning, explorations, adventure, and love. Spending time with them has given me a lot of vision and clarity. There aren't many appealing cultural reference points for where we are. The wacky aunt, the witchy crone, desperate cougars. No, thank you. I don't feel desperate or wacky, but something else came into focus for me as I spent time with this group of women. It's up to us to create a new archetype, to do the birthing of that vision. As women who are fruitful in many ways, we create beauty, community, and connection outside the confines of the traditional family unit. Devoid of maternal exhaustion, we've got a lot of juice. What do we do with all of that chi is the challenge. Confounding expectations, especially my own, has become one main pursuit. Why limit myself? I'm not just doing this for myself, but for the young ones who are watching, taking note, and witnessing how my generation lives and loves. One of my chosen little sisters recently told me that she asked her young friends how old they thought I was. Their answers were nearly a decade and a half less than my actual age. She shared it with me as a compliment, and I appreciate the spirit in which it was said. After thanking her for what was intended kindness, my response to her was this: I'm trying to reconsider youth as the only means of beauty. What if, as women, we claim ourselves at every step along the way? What incredible empowerment would lie in that choice? Her beautiful eyes widened. She got quiet. She was paying attention. And so I take my steps forward, not just for me, but for the younger ones. Just as my chosen big sisters have blazed trails for me, it's my turn to do the same. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen and sending you love and a beautiful day. Hi, friends. If you have been enjoying Spaces Between, please take a moment to subscribe, and leaving a review is the cherry on top. Thank you so much, and I look forward to connecting with you next week.